Please welcome Brian Solis and Ted Cohen.
I'm really thrilled to do this today. Brian Solis is here. This is going to be great. The idea, as I always say, is you came here this morning very early because he has a lot to tell us today. And if you leave here not learning what you came here to learn, it's because you didn't raise your hand and ask a question. So as opposed to most sessions, we're not going to wait until the end to do questions. When Brian says something really interesting but stretches your mind a little bit and you're not sure, raise your hand and we'll delve into it, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. It is my pleasure. And I also said to Brian, I usually don't give anybody questions beforehand because I want to get their reaction to the question the first time. So let's start with the first one. You were at South by Southwest.
Yes.
And what the fuck happened to Russell Brand?
Well, you know, if anybody here knows Russell Brand, I guess it wasn't much of a surprise.
Now we give the backstory. For those of you who weren't at South by Southwest.
So, for those who weren't at South by Southwest, every couple of years I try to bring someone amazing out to have a conversation about how digital is changing their world. So, I brought Shaq out there, I brought Billy Corgan and the Smashing Pumpkins, and this year was going to be Russell Brand. And he has a new YouTube show, and he's basically sort of quit acting, and he's just born-again spiritual person, and he's using YouTube as a way to sort of spread the true news, and he calls it truths, and the true news according to Russell Brand. But it's been wildly popular, right? He's been able to use YouTube as a way of sort of defeating traditional media, and I thought it would be a fascinating conversation for South by Southwest. At the same time, there was a movie premiering about his life, and that movie goes back to the deep, dark history of Russell Brand and his addiction years, and he just wasn't happy about the fact that it was premiering. He wasn't comfortable with it, so he says, rather than come and talk to you about the right story he wants you to know, he decided to back out of the entire event as a protest to the movie. He just wasn't comfortable with it. And I said, Russell, you realize if you back out of this, you're going to draw attention to the movie, which then I started to think, maybe that's what you were trying to do. And so we knew about the fact that he wasn't coming to South by Southwest for a week, but he dropped the bomb officially a couple days before. And I woke up one morning with Brian Solis, your name has appeared in the following media. Billboard, People Magazine, Us Magazine, and essentially he issued a statement, said, I cannot come, I'm not comfortable with this, and sorry to Brian Solis, and there you go. So I probably got as much publicity for him not coming, and so I'm cool with it.
So did you interview a cardboard stand-up? No?
Yeah. No.
Okay. It would have been a thing if you interviewed in absentia. That could have been a lot of fun.
Well, at the meantime, it would have been an important platform for him. I don't think he realizes that, during Interactive for South by Southwest, it was this new convergence thing that we've been working with South by on, bringing music and digital together. The idea was for him to tell the story to reverberate, right? To use the fucking media that you talk about as a way to get your story across so that you can change the world. And instead, he used a fucking press release that said he wasn't coming on the internet, and then that's it. And so I was just, it was defeatism at its best.
Which brings me to the point. Let's say 15 years, maybe, I don't know, maybe it has to be 20 years ago, but it could be 15. When companies were doing marketing campaigns or they're doing PR campaigns, they had the illusion, at least, that they had a certain control about what the outcome would be. So they would, here's the ad campaign, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do bus stop signs, we're gonna wrap buses, we're gonna do TV spots, and here's the campaign. And one of the turning points for me was the Chevy Tahoe or Yukon campaign, if you're familiar, where Chevy in the States put up footage of Chevy trucks driving through the wilderness and by the side of the lake and by the cabin for their fans to create their own Chevy commercial. And the Sierra Club went on and started creating Chevy is fucking up the universe commercials with the footage. And there was this moment of, do we pull the campaign down? And they decided to let it go, that they realized they couldn't control the outcome. The Sierra Club gave them props for they expected, again, they would pull it down, it would go away, and that would be the end of it. The Sierra Club things were kind of fun to watch, but Chevy Yukon fans were like, yay Chevy. So while they didn't expect it to go that way, they wrote it out. So today's marketing campaigns You can't control how your audience is going to react. You can't control the conversation. How do you advise people that you work with on how to basically ride that disruption?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, the psychology of it is that most strategists and executives still believe they are in control, right? So you have to get over that hump. But there's something, though, about all of this that I just got to be honest with you. You never were in control. You just spent more money to talk louder than other people, right? And that's different. If you actually realize that the whole power of social media and digital today is that you are part of a bigger community that you don't own, right? Once you understand that and you can appreciate that, you realize that there's actually more control that you have today than you've ever had before, right? Because you can be direct, you can be indirect, you can be part of. And the idea is, what type of conversation are you trying to start? What type of marketing are you trying to do? The problem with this whole environment is that the word marketing means that I have to lie to you to try to convince you that something is cool, right? So what?
But that's the challenge, because we have this thing now about we're having an authentic conversation. We're having a real dialogue. Buy our soap. Please buy our soap. But we mean it authentically and sincerely.
Right. Well, authenticity is the new bullshit. So the truth is that the truth is that we're still trying to market using these channels and be authentic and transparent when in fact we actually haven't changed philosophically what we're really trying to do. And that's where the new control comes in, is that if you can use any one of these platforms to actually be part of a community, then what is the community you're trying to create? What does that look like? What does it feel like? If you're going to have a conversation, if somebody's going to have an experience and they're going to talk about it, what would they say, right? And that, you have to, using all of this new media, you have to think of it as the outcome, right? So everybody talks about influencers as part of the new regime of marketing. Well, what's an influencer? Well, somebody who has a shitload of Twitter followers. Brian, that's an influencer. Well, maybe. But the word influence means to change behavior or cause effect, right? And the thing that marketers don't do very well is think about, well, what kind of effect am I trying to have? Oh, we got to sell more albums. We have to get more views. We have to get a bunch of likes. Well, all right, you're either selling or you're marketing to me. What's the real outcome? And because this is very human, right? In the age of machines, humanity is the killer app. What are you trying to do that means something to me personally, and what makes belonging to your community matter, right? We don't have those conversations.
I want to go somewhere that might be awkward, and if you don't think we should go there, literally just go. Next question. There is a really, I'm being serious. For folks who know me, they might think I'm trying to be funny here, but there's nothing funny about it.
I'm worried.
Yeah, I know. There's a really scary brand activation campaign going on right now, and I'm serious, and called ISIS. And when I've watched the news lately, they're not talking about how many tanks or how many planes. It's how effective their social media campaign is to be a major influencer, to convert mind share, to have a brand activation that a year ago, I don't know how many people in this room, a year ago I didn't know what ISIS was. The news on a daily basis talks equally about their ability to control social media as they do talking about, whatever the, missile attack was. What are your thoughts on, where we are now, where we're basically talking about social media as a way to not only influence but shape minds?
All right.
I mean, if you don't want to go there, we can go to.
Can someone bring me a drink? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But honestly,
you missed last year. I had a bottle of rum here.
All right. So everybody's impressionable. Everybody's mind is open, right? And they've figured out social media. If you think about it, it's not really as much about technology as it is about just philosophy, psychology, sociology, anthropology, ethnography. I mean, this is very human media. And this is what, to the point earlier, is that you have to understand the people that you're trying to make an impression upon and how you can aspirationally make them what they're trying to do, right? Social media is incredibly narcissistic, and that's a good thing, right? I call it the ecosystem. And what ISIS and ISIL has done very well is figured out what pisses you off about where you live or your government or how your upbringing or your environment, and they've been able to activate levers and triggers in you, and you can do this. Happens all the time. Brands have done this very well, and there's two ways. I want you to remember this. There are two ways to change behavior. You inspire it or you manipulate it, right? And they are incredibly good at manipulating it. I work with a startup that has basically Google for the dark net, right? And the dark net is the internet that no one knows about, where you find all kinds of shit like ISIS or child pornography or Bitcoin and drug trafficking. And
like Silk Road?
Like Silk Road. And I can tell you that looking at ISIS and ISIL activity is brilliant. And if marketers thought the way that these guys did, it would be very scary. But the whole idea is that they've done two things really well, unfortunately, and one is they are able to trigger psychological levers, and the second is that they have used traditional media as a way of furthering their own propaganda. It is unbelievable how manipulated our own media is into furthering their cause. Every time they talk about
elaborate.
Yeah, every time they release a video, every time they strategically release something that wants to get out there, the media propagates their story, their message, their purpose. And so they're actually using social media as a way to trigger traditional media.
So I'll go to a less emotional topic. No, I really was. I'm just not. I'm fascinated in a bad way by watching it, because last night, literally, sitting in the air, was watching CNN. And if you watch Wolf Blitzer over and over again, you want to kill yourself. But it was just talking. ISIS today released. I was like, and their social media campaign. It was really like, that's all. They didn't talk about troop strength. They didn't talk about boots on the ground. They talked about how many tweets they had yesterday. I mean, it's a scary metric. I've never seen in a war where the metric is the number of tweets, number of retweets.
Right. I'll tell you a funny story. So this, since this, no one's live tweeting this or anything, but
anybody on Paris? Anybody on Paris? Anybody using Periscope right now?
No.
Yeah, you got a question over here.
Oh wait, where?
Right here.
Oh, go ahead.
You mentioned how, hi by the way, big fan. Thank you, sorry. You mentioned how ISIS psychologically triggers people with their tactics and their manipulation, all that stuff. Can you, I know that's like kind of evil and all that stuff, but can you translate that in a way where, how do bands do the same thing? Is there a way for like a musician to like,
well, we can make it, okay.
Have as big of an influence?
We'll go from,
like, I'm not saying like,
do you want to go from ISIS to Pantera? Let's talk about Pantera.
So if you want, I mean, basically, at the end of the day, like they're very, like it or not, they're very powerful and they have a huge effect. Is there like a same way that bands can have that same effect? I'm not saying like manipulate people, but is there like a same path for bands? Is it the same route? Is it that's the comparison basically is what I'm asking.
So sort of ISIS the musical.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna try to do my best to shift gears on this, but yes. So let's just take them out of the picture, all right, completely. What bands,
or as
artists...
would say, issue number 2.
Look, this one is really hard because I'm going to just strip it down, right? Because I don't want to answer the question as how do bands use these platforms to do this. What is it that makes the band or the artist or the brand or whatever it is? What does it stand for, right? What makes it so fucking amazing? Because we don't spend enough time really thinking about that. Well, they have a great song or they have a great product. No, see, when you realize that social media is incredibly narcissistic, that means that you have to cater to someone else besides yourself, right? Because everyone is more important than you. And the sooner we understand that, the sooner we can change how we start to market. So, what is it that is so cool to someone else? And then you realize, wow, there's like 6 to 8 different types of answers to that because there's 6 to 8 different types of people usually. So how do then we apply that? And you realize that the product, the song, the image, all of this stuff that we spent all these years really prioritizing don't become as important as the experience. So what you have to then try to do is articulate what is the experience for each one of those people, and then you start to build the strategy, the platform, the imagery, the videos, all of these things to translate that experience. And then you have to actually do 2 things. One is you have to do the marketing the way you've always done it, right? But you have to now think about, how do I create a movement from the ground up, right? So the thing about music and artistry that I really, really love is that it's about, at the end of the day, it's still about people doing something in the real world. And that is where social media, I think, becomes the most powerful. I'll share an example that Billy Corgan said at South by a couple of years back, and it was, the sooner that artists realize that they're not in the music business anymore, the better that they could be at marketers. Because marketers have to realize that you're not selling music anymore, right? Spotify fucked that up for everybody. Now you are selling an experience. And that has to come through in the marketing. And marketing and social media is not about, hey, you know, look at my tweet. Everything you publish on any platform, I don't care if it's Facebook, if it's YouTube, whatever, is a social object. And you have to think about the mechanics of a social object. Anytime you publish something, it has to be intentional. What are you doing and what are you trying to have happen? And this is what ISIS is very good at. What effect do you want to have, or how do you want to change behavior? And you have to think about it maniacally at every level. You don't just tweet, you don't just publish. Everything is methodical. And a social object is something, by the way, that goes, this is really geeky in Silicon Valley terms, but all of these social networks have catered to something about you emotionally, psychologically, that are addictive, right? They absolutely pull your levers. Facebook does, right? That's why the algorithm keeps changing. All of these social networks manipulate you to keep coming back, right? And so you have to do the same thing that they're doing to make the social objects that you produce. You have to talk to someone and through someone at the same time. A view is not good enough. A like is not good enough. You have to think about, this video is going to do what? And it is that, always that. What are you trying to do beyond just the marketing?
That's interesting, and I'll call them out only because they're not working together anymore. I was meeting with Linkin Park's management, and they wanted to do they were trying to come up with some kind of a campaign, and they said, well, you know, Linkin Park has 14 million likes. And I went, well, what does that mean? And they went, well, that's why we had you come here. You know, you're supposed to know. I said, no, that was a rhetorical question. You got 14 million likes. What are you doing with them? How are you using people that have said they like what you're doing to then move them somewhere? To what's the call to action? How are you resonating with them? And I happened the other night to look at a session that we did a few years ago in Boston with Amanda Palmer. And Amanda Palmer has become the poster child over the last few years of how to use social media. And two things came out of it. We talked about, there was an artist, there's a rap artist, Jeff Jones. Is that the right name? Tell me if I'm wrong. He was talking about a friend of his that got 500,000 followers in like days. And then proceeded to go, buy my record, buy my record, buy my record, buy my record. And 500,000 followers dropped to like 20,000 in a few more days. Because he did nothing that was like, you gotta hear my other friend's record this, or did you see that? Or he used it basically as a megaphone. And all he was standing there at a carnival barking, you know, buy this snake oil. The other one that we talked about was timing. I mentioned at the time there was an artist who I'd gone to see her show at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night at the Mint in LA, down on Pico. Next morning at 9, and I signed up for her mailing list. Next morning at 9 o'clock, I opened my inbox, and there's an email from her saying, thanks for coming to my show last night. I became a fan. Had I gotten that same email a week later, I wouldn't have been, for me, it wouldn't have been the same thing. That opening up the mail the next morning going, oh, she sent me, you know. It was great. It was all about the timing and at least a perceived intimacy that she cared that the people that came to the show on a Sunday night, they mattered to her. So talk a little bit about, first of all, a campaign that you've been involved in over the last few years, something that you did that you're really proud of, and then something that you admire that somebody else has done, whether it's a brand, a person.
Those are the hardest ones, because...
So, you said ecosystem. What are you proud of? Go ahead.
No, I mean, look...
You're up here. You're the keynoter. Why the fuck are you here?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out now.
You know what I mean. We talked about this before. I said, I'll tease you. Don't
There's a couple reasons that it's a hard question to answer, because I don't know that. I think part of the problem is when we talk about case studies, or when we look at companies that have done really cool things, the problem is that becomes a standard, right? Everybody starts to Google it and says, oh, okay, I'm going to reverse engineer it. And so I'm a proponent of having just this flagrant answer of like, nah, no one's doing it right. And the reason why is because then look, I'm serious about this. I really do think that the relationship that you're trying to have with your fans, your community, your customers, whatever it is that you're here to sell or market, that relationship is supposed to be, use the right word, it's supposed to be intimate, right? You're supposed to take it seriously. And you're supposed to really think about what's that supposed to feel like, look like? You know, you have to remember a couple things. That the problem with marketing is that it goes down just to how it's funded, right? Everything's campaign driven, which means that implies that you have a start and you have a stop. But communities are alive all the time. And what I try to do is say, let's not even talk about other brands. Because I can promise you, I've been studying and trying to push and inspire this whole concept of social and digital since 1997. Right, when there were discussion boards and forums and the original social media, and we're still fucking it up because we think we talk at people and we don't even know who people are. They're just numbers, they're likes, 15 million, People confuse a like with the fact that it's like an opt-in, it's not. We still don't even know how to use email, right? And we still think a website is a digital brochure. We still haven't figured any of this stuff out. And I ask everybody to start from scratch. Start by saying, what is the relationship you're trying to have? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Why would I want to date you? Why would I want to sleep with you? You have to think about that stuff. You have to make yourself desirable, and you have to make yourself desirable every day. Then social becomes an enabler. Digital becomes an enabler. It just becomes something that you actualize to do these things. But we keep approaching it with the same fucking philosophy as we always have. Use this, make a message, let's get legal to approve it. Oh no, we have to. We don't even write for the people we're trying to inspire, right? We write for the people that are gonna approve what we're gonna try to publish. And so the whole thing is just broken. When you work with agencies and you give them the brief, this is what we need, and then you get agencies who come in and they propagate the same problem over and over again. It starts with, what do you stand for, seriously, and what are you trying to do, and how do you use these tools to just be human? And I'll give you an example, right? We're so fucked up we don't even realize that the music industry has just started to change for a really, really long time. And you can look at its history from MTV, right? The minute MTV stopped playing music, right, is the minute that we lost the soul of artistry. Exactly. Okay? Now we have cribs and 16-year-old pregnant girls that are celebrities, and you have this whole concept that what ended up happening is that your consumer became more important than the artist, right? Because they had all of the access to these tools to become famous as well, right? So now everybody's famous. So I know I look young, it's the oil of Olay, but I used to have posters of my favorite artists on the wall, right? Nobody does that anymore because no artist is around long enough for you to dedicate wall space, right? Unless it's Drake, right? Because he seems to magically reinvent himself all the time. But that's the point, is that you have to keep relevant because the consumer is better than you, more famous than you in their mind, and you have to use all of these channels to remind people of the relationship you're trying to have with them, because they're not going to put a poster of you up on their wall, but they will stand next to you and say, I support this artist because they represent some part of me aspirationally, but they're not my idol. They represent me.
But that's the other dichotomy is, people are jaded about, you know, brands trying to market to them. At the same time, they identify. There is this duality between, I don't want to be marketed to, but here are my Adidas, or here's my whatever, I've got my Prada bag. And so people are somewhat disingenuous about how brand conscious they are, how devoted they are to follow. You know, if I hear one more word from my girlfriend about the Kardashians, I will kill myself. I mean, you watch John Oliver?
Yes.
Did you see the one about the Kardashians and it's the Armenian massacre?
I could only
The Armenian genocide. So the reason that it's getting attention now is the Kardashians went, and that's why people know about the genocide now after 100 years, is because Kim talked about it.
Well, at least she's helping something.
So you live in San Francisco? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, really. You live in San Francisco. Have you been to Outside Lands?
Yes.
Okay, so Outside Lands is like Coachella, and it was a turning point last year when I said to somebody, so how was Outside Lands for you? And they said, well, you know, the Samsung Pavilion was good, but the Toyota Pavilion wasn't as good as last year. And I went, what about the bands? Oh, I didn't see a lot of music. I was looking at brand activations. So we started calling it Outside Brands instead of Outside Lands. And everybody was being marketed to. Everybody was being, you know, sign up for this, paint this, and we'll take a picture of you holding it, all those kinds of things. Is there going to be a big push? Is there going to be like this big shrug where everybody walks away from it? Because you start to hear about people who taking a 3-month sabbatical from Facebook, or they basically are taking a break from social media. Is there any kind of watershed moment coming, or any type of a, you know, rejection, or is this just the normal course of media people?
I don't know. I feel like I could listen to you all day. Okay, so there's a couple questions in that. Let's go to the last one first.
Okay.
By the way, Outside Lands is funny because he said it's like Coachella. It's like Coachella, except it's freezing because it's in San Francisco and it's foggy. And
Okay, well, before you start, okay, hold the thought. So I go there. First of all, I don't go to Coachella because I can't afford a golf cart with a driver. And the competition at Coachella, oh, you only have a 4-seat golf cart. I have a 6-seat. You know, it's really unbelievable. When the rap starts covering Coachella, we know we're in trouble.
Yeah, well, I don't go to Coachella because I don't have a beard.
But I go to... So, I go to Outside Lands for the first time 3 years ago. I begged my way into the AOL cabana because they were giving out gloves. And I sold my soul for a pair of gloves. I said, tell me what you want me to send you. What do you want? You want an iPhone? I'll get you an iPhone. I need a pair of gloves. My fingers are turning blue. I never knew it could be that cold in August.
Welcome to San Francisco.
Exactly. So bad.
All right, so, all right, this is, I promise this is going to be a relevant story. You know, the thing about this movement of digital detox is also an act of narcissism, because people grandly announce that they're leaving Facebook and then read every comment that they get and respond. It is true, though, that we are overwhelmed. How many people in the audience have an Apple Watch? Or how about this? How many have ordered one? Wow, that's...
How many ordered one to sell it on eBay?
Whether we know it or not, we are actually going to give ourselves even more to this media, this technology, right? Wearables, Internet of Things. We have a question over here too, if we want to get a mic. But I'm going to keep answering this in the meantime. You're getting deeper and going to be more influenced and more influential than you know. So look, you might take a break from it, but it's actually now ingrained in our physicality. Our brains have actually been a little bit rewired in how we do, how we think, how we're influenced, how we influence other people. So there's no escape, I'm sorry.
Right.
But we're just getting started, right? I live in Silicon Valley and I study a lot of disruptive technology, and there's technology that we're working on right now that is going to be under your skin. There's stuff that you're going to be swallowing. I call it the human API. because you literally are going to become part of the Internet of Things. You are going to broadcast a signal out of your body that can be tracked on the internet, and it exists right now. And it's going to be used for your health insurance. It's going to be used by your employers. So you're not disconnecting. Now, aside from that scary note, the future's pretty bright. But
Yeah, but it's not a bad thing. I was at a conference yesterday. I swim from conference to conference. So there's a thing called DLD, Digital Lifestyle and Design. It started out in Munich, and now it's in Tel Aviv and in New York and San Francisco. And there was a guy there named Vishal Gondal. I don't know if you know him, but he's starting a health startup that basically will take the data feed from your Apple Watch, or I happen to use a Samsung Gear Fit. It'll take that, it'll take your Polar and whatever, and on a daily basis, it's going to be 29 bucks a month, 29 bucks a month, finish the sentence, Ted. And it basically, you're going to a live trainer who's going to give you daily feedback based on the biometrics and make recommendations of try this today. So it's all the great things of having a trainer, but you don't have to worry about where you are. And he's basically, I said to him point blank, I said, I have a Polar, I have a Gear Fit, I have a lot of toys. Yep. And I said, can you take all those multiple data feeds? He said, absolutely. And the more feeds, the better. And you're going to end up being healthier at the end of this whole thing. So it's not all a bad thing.
No, just wait until there's another generation of that technology that already exists. Because this is for trainers and fitness and what have you, but there are also, you don't really get to improve health until you take blood, right? And so this is the next wearable as well. So the same things that are going to be translated are these. So, but this all comes down to, by the way, the idea that as people become more connected, right? There was a time just a couple of years ago that this was called the second screen, right? But now this is the first screen. And the thing that I'd like you to think about is that this is the first screen, your watch is becoming the second screen, your tablet is becoming the third screen, and then your laptop will be the fourth screen. And you have to think about, from a marketing perspective, what does the experience look like on each of those screens, and how is it native, right? So you have to design an experience that is engaging, culturally relevant to the screen, that it's something that I can do with one finger, which sounds a little dirty, but at the same time, you have to design these independently. And what we do really horribly is we try to make one experience work across all these different screens, and that's not going to work anymore. So all of these devices are force creating people to actually start to think, well, how do I use my watch? Why aren't you creating an experience for my watch? Because I love my watch. Or why aren't you doing this better? Stop making me go to websites where I have to click, because that's not what this is about.
Right.
So I want to make sure with the minutes we have left that we get to his question.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, thank you very much for taking the question. Just wanted to ask, because we were talking before about Amanda Palmer and being campaign-centric and kind of going towards a kind of a new direction in how our old plans and formats were kind of all wrong to begin with. What do you think is to be said for, you know, diversity or assimilation? What do you think is the importance of standardization now, or is there any?
Oh, that's a tough one. I started thinking when you said Landru, assimilation, you're part of the body.
Yeah.
Star Trek reference, folks. Wow, that's a tough. Can you, wait, give him the mic back again. Can you restate that? Because there's a lot going on there.
Sorry, yeah, so I just mean, like, when you get, you know, things like you say campaign-centric, and then you get everyone kind of doing a different campaign with different kind of sets of rules and, you know, having variable degrees of success. If we're to go forward and have, you know, a kind of a community success, you know, how much importance do you think there is to be either, do you want to kind of promote as individual, or do you want to kind of promote as come and be a community, you know? Because now it's a very difficult kind of dilemma whether you want to be part of something greater or stand out above that.
Can I give the dumb answer and then you give the smart answer? For me, that's Pinterest. Pinterest, it's diversity inside of a community. Everybody's Pinterest board, the way they express themselves is completely unique. yet they're part of a community. Pinterest is somewhere where people go to be inspired. And I mean, that's the best example of joining a community, but really standing out. Now, you probably have a much better answer to that. But for me, when I saw Pinterest, it was a way that I didn't have to follow the crowd, but I could still go to a central place to find inspiration in various areas.
You know, for me, it's the hardest part of any of this is actually trying to define what is a community, right? And I'm a big proponent for human beings, believe it or not. And this idea is that it has to be relatable, and you have to understand that there is no one relatability. So when you define what a community is, it's not just why are we together. It's what are we going to do together that makes belonging matter, right? And so it's even thinking about what that community stands for is where you start. And then from there, whatever the platform is, right, you have to think about, am I doing something that furthers that purpose of what we define as that community? I'll give you an example. I worked in the 90s is one of my favorite examples with, at the time, digital photography wasn't a thing yet, right? There was still film. And to make that, I worked with some of the biggest brands at the time who were trying to make digital photography a thing. And they were going to the New York Times, they were going to all of the big publications, Popular Photography, all of the things that you thought would make the case, like, yo, digital cameras are coming, yet they didn't work, right? No one was buying them, and it was
But
because...
was it because of the quality of the camera, or was it because...
Well,
Because I always, my thing in music, we always talk about, you know, MP3s suck, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, whatever. I always point to digital photography of your first digital camera sucked. But it was digital, but it sucked. Now they're better. They're better than anything I was ever able to do with film.
Yes, but the point is everything's always going to be better, right? And at the time, though, you had to think about the strengths. And so it comes back to your question, what did it stand for? Why, right? We don't spend enough time answering the question of why. Why should I care, right? And so we did that, and we realized actually the answers weren't about traditional photography. At the time, it was about doing other things specifically. It was a very vertical approach. Well, at the time, you know, I think the highest resolution was like, I don't know, maybe a stamp size. And what we ended up doing is finding a whole bunch of enthusiast applications, medical applications, believe it or not, and we found communities, online discussion boards and forums and groups, and people asking all of these questions about digital cameras from the influencer standpoint, and no one had answers to them, right? And all we did was started to generalize the themes of the common questions that people were asking, then used this sort of approach of why, not only what the answer is, but why would we be the best solution for them, right? And just these philosophical conversations of relatability actually would change the branding of the company, the purpose of the company, the vision of the company. How do you define the product? Because at the time they were like, this many resolution, this megapixel, this battery capacity. None of that mattered. It then became about applications and meaning and all kinds of really human being stuff. And then we went into those communities as ourselves. We didn't sell, we didn't say that we were the brand that was in our bios. We just started answering questions and giving examples of applications and talking about the weaknesses but the capabilities too for those applications. And what ended up happening is that people started clicking through to the bio to see, oh, they're working with this camera company. And then we were able to track a shitload of sales of cameras every time we engaged. And you know what? We weren't selling, we were just answering questions. And you know what I learned? This is why I became a social scientist in the 90s, is because of something called reciprocity. The more helpful you are, the more genuine you are, the more great intentions you have, the more purpose you have, the more people respond. And that was the best marketing ever, right? That was still marketing, that was still sales, but we earned reciprocity. And that is what a community is about.
Okay, if you get a mic over to Tommy here in the front, but I have one question beforehand. Taking that, right, who has the microphone? There you are, over here, the gentleman in the lovely black fedora. We have 3 minutes left, according to the gentleman there. He's holding up a sign that says rap. Okay, yo, no.
knew you were going to do that.
I couldn't help myself. So, talking about, I got to meet early on, and every time I say I meet them early on, I go, and I didn't buy stock, which kills me. I met the GoPro guys at the beginning. Everything about the GoPro was counterintuitive to everything else that Canon and Nikon and everybody else was doing. A little cube that had no viewfinder, no zoom, no nothing, but they found their community. They found where it resonated, and it just blew through. And now everybody talks about, I have a GoPro in my pocket, my son has a GoPro, my girlfriend, that was counter to every traditional way of marketing a device. It was ugly. There was nothing about it that was sexy, but they found their audience early on, which was active sports, skiing and whatever. Do you have any thoughts on again, is that inspiration, that's innovation, that's inspiration, can that be imitated again? Or is she just...
Yes, absolutely. It's the same story for the flip cam, right? That was also the ugliest camera in the world. But the idea is that, and I'll relate this, to the music world as well. If you think that headphone companies are in business because of the music, you're wrong. Right? You wear headphones everywhere you go because the music you listen to is your theme music, right? It's your anthem. Mm-hmm. The same with GoPro, right? They activated your ego by placing those on your helmets, placing those on your clothing, because you became the star of your own reality show, right? And so the idea was just to activate that. Same with Red Bull, right? It's all about what you do. Right? And the sooner we all realize that the music business isn't about the music, it's about the lifestyle that you and the experience that you create, that is what GoPro did. That is what the best brands are doing today. They become experiences, and that's why that worked. Right.
Do we have time for one more question? With the god of the time clock.
You got a no on that.
I'm still going to let Tommy. Take us out really quickly with something. Comment or whatever.
So,
Your guess. Tom Silverman.
Brian, I see it says it's time to move on to social media 2.0, and that you're tracking disruption in California, which is where it usually starts, if not Stockholm.
Quickly.
Tell me, is there anything that you see that could disrupt radio's ability to break music? As big as the web has gotten, and as potent as online media has gotten, nothing can touch traditional FM radio in terms of reach and frequency, and all mass media for that matter, in terms of breaking music. When will the web be able to actually break music the way radio does?
Man, wow.
Yeah, that'll be the session in the lobby.
Holy moly. Okay, all right, I'm going to do my best really fast on this. By the way, I think the radio's ability to break new music is still a pretty big deal, but you're already starting to see YouTube and the new Facebook video platform that's coming, that's going to become more powerful, that they're trying to compete with YouTube. You're already starting to see music break, right? A lot of us just don't know it yet because radio is still a little bit more popular, but I think at some point it's just how do we define popular, right? Because that is when things start to change. Because the music that's on the radio to break is still a real corrupt business in how a lot of this stuff happens, and just like politics, it's going to be around for a while. But in the meantime, though, new platforms, if you want to break new artists, that's happening all the time, right? Things like Spotify, I've watched and experimented with a lot of cool things breaking on all of these platforms, but the word popular is different because you didn't hear it on the radio. Does that make it any less effective, right? So the short answer is radio's going to be around for a while. I hope it, but I stopped listening to radio because the type of new music that is breaking is, well, I'll just leave it with two words: Iggy Azalea.
Okay. So how do people start a dialogue with you? What's your Twitter?
Hey, so yeah, just thebriansolis@gmail. I really try to respond to everybody, and @BrianSolis on Twitter. But other than that, I'll be around. So thank you very much.
And I'm at Spinal Tap.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.